Well, good morning on this hot day, hot Friday in July here in the Carolinas. It's been a warm month. Still got August to go, but it is Friday and been a busy week, but a productive week. I hope it has been for you as well. I had a good time talking with Steen about automation from a testing perspective. I think it's probably maybe the most critical component of a modern software delivery system with regards to providing the speed and the quality that we're all striving for with these type of investments. To get us started this morning, again, welcome. If you've got questions this morning, you can use the chat button at the bottom of your screen in the WebEx, and you can click on that, and then you can ask your question in there, and hopefully I'll be able to respond. If not, then I'll respond to you by email if we've got your information. But again, thank you for joining us. Let me pull up, or let me share my PowerPoint slide for the week. And I'm going to just cover some of the things that Steve and I talked about on the podcast. Testing automation is, again, as we talked about, the benefits from a business standpoint can be significant. There's some things that we have to do in order to maximize efficiency with regard to automation. And we'll talk about some of that today, and if you have questions about it. Testing automation from a benefit standpoint is key to shifting left. Shifting left is a term, we've mentioned it on the podcast, but it's used to describe a discipline where we are able to provide an ecosystem, a software delivery system that gives us the ability to identify and resolve issues as quickly as possible, and the reasons are fairly common sense. It's going to cost us less money, going to hopefully spend less time in identifying problems as close to that generation of that code as possible. So when we talk about shifting left, we're looking at that software delivery lifecycle as a linear function. And what we want to do is, if requirements and coding start far left in that life cycle, we want to shift problem identification, problem resolution as far left in that cycle as possible. The longer it takes in that cycle, or the farther right in that cycle, meaning in subsequent integration testing or user acceptance testing and Lord forbid, production, the longer typically it takes and the more it typically costs to fix those problems. So we want to build an ecosystem, a software delivery system that gives us the opportunity to find problems quick and to resolve them quickly. And that's why automation is so important. Obviously, it's going to increase the velocity from a product delivery standpoint. I believe one of the benefits of automation is quality. We talk about automation, a lot of people talk about it from a productivity standpoint. But if you think about the quality that can be gained from leveraging automation, I think it's substantial. And the reason is that you're able to, one of the things that I like to do with customers is to understand their current state, processes and technologies, and understand how the best resources in the organization are doing their testing. When you understand that and you can identify that, you can begin to codify those processes using automation. So you gain the capabilities of the best you have in your organization from a testing standpoint, and you can perpetuate that through all of your testing activities across multiple teams through the use of automation. The ability to codify the best of what you do, I think, is an essential and critical component or benefit of automation. So I think from a quality standpoint, you're going to see significant reductions in the number of issues that are identified later in the process by leveraging that automation early in the cycle. You're certainly going to become more efficient with regard to leveraging automation based on those velocity gains and improvements. There's some things we're going to have to do, I think, though, to get the true benefit of automation with regard to data provisioning. And we talked about that with Irene and Kevin a couple of weeks ago, getting better at provisioning and leveraging not only the right data, but the right amount of data. And so we can become more efficient. I think automation obviously is going to minimize the friction in that software delivery cycle. The more we can automate, the better we can deliver. It just makes a lot of sense if you think about it. If we can create test cases that can be shared across multiple developers, multiple teams, that can be utilized or reused every time a change is committed to a particular program or base of code, then if we can leverage those use cases over and over and over again, then that's going to have a significant impact on the quality of what we produce. From a total test standpoint, our Topaz for Total Test product, we talked about that. Steam was very intense. I mean, intense is probably the wrong word, but was very careful to make sure that we understood the value of test-cased automation. Now, there are a lot of testing tools on the marketplace, mainframe and non-mainframe, not so much on the mainframe side, but on the non-mainframe side. But a lot of those test tools require a lot of manual work to define those test cases. And so the ability of Total Test to leverage Expediter, a debugger, to build those automatically is going to save you a ton of time with regards to producing those, and they're going to be accurate versus having to build those manually for obvious reasons. The other thing about Total Test, and we touched on this last week, is that the test cases that we create, again, automatically, can be leveraged manually in the early stages of the development activity with the developer. But more importantly, they can be reused and automatically executed in your CI/CD pipelines. And again, benefits to our customers. We're already seeing this across the board. Efficiencies up significantly. Quality, I think, it is a big benefit. We've talked about that. Velocity, the numbers can be outrageous. I've seen numbers that look almost unbelievable. But again, if you think about if you're having to test and you're doing particular tasks over and over and over again, which occurs in software development, then the ability to reuse these test case scenarios can have a significant impact on throughput of what you get through the system, which obviously is going to impact your time to market. So I think these were some of the key points that were brought out in the conversation with Steam. And so let me stop the sharing at this point in time. We will get to your questions. Before we start, I see we've already got a few this morning, like 7, 8. If there are additional questions based on what we just said, or if you think of something as you come through there, press the chat button at the bottom of the WebEx, and then you can add questions to that. Hopefully, I'll be able to try to answer those in the next few minutes. Also, before I get started, still got the promotion with the Good Coding Mug. It's been a hit. So, best question, and I get to choose the best question. Best question in the bunch gets a Good Coding Mug. And so get those questions in there. So the questions not only help you, but they help all those that have opportunity to listen. So let me get right to that. The first question is from Sean. Sean asked, how does Compuware automate its testing work for your products? I think we had Dave Rizzo on 3 weeks ago. And Dave talked a lot about how we leverage testing. We are at a point now, we've got multiple products that we support and that we deliver to our customers, we're at a point now where that entire cycle, and I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it's close to 90%. I think it's even a little higher than 90% of the work required to take code, tested code, and to transition it to a delivery environment is completely automated now. We have got pipelines that are leveraging a lot of different technologies, a lot of our technologies in the form of build, compile, SCM type activities, testing activities that we talked about with Steam, and deployment activities. And so we are almost at the point to where we've got instant delivery to a production state. Now it takes time to run all that and for those builds to occur, obviously. But it's amazing how fast these guys in the labs have been able to implement these changes and new capabilities, new features to our systems, to our presenters. We leverage Jenkins primarily as our CI/CD server, and with regards to we've used a lot of different tools on the non-mainframe side for all the Eclipse-based activity. A lot of the same tools that you're using on the mainframe side, which is where I'm focused. We're using ISPW. We were 5-6 years ago, we were an Endeavor shop, and we made the transition to ISPW several years ago because of its ability to better support agile methods. But we use ISPW for generation, compilation, link editing. We use Total Test for some of the COBOL code. Not a lot of the product code is COBOL, so most of it's in assembler on the mainframe side. And so for testing that, we use a lot of HyperStation. We've built a lot of HyperStation test cases, and we are able to execute those test cases automatically. Typically, there's a couple methods, but typically we use a Topaz CLI plugin within Jenkins that allows us to execute batch jobs. And so with HyperStation, you can execute your test cases online in a batch mode. And so we're able to submit those test cases to an initiator through that JCL or ZOS plugin within Jenkins. It gives us the ability to essentially execute any JCL job to our development mainframes. And so a lot of our automated testing is leveraging that type of capabilities from a testing standpoint. Once the testing is complete, there's some packaging work that has to be done. We use Xebia tools. We also leverage ISPW from a deployment standpoint in deploying those packages or those files. So that's how we do it. We are a Jenkins shop, and again, we use a lot of our own technology for the work required to get those products to a production state. Next question comes from Francisco. Francisco asks, can regression testing be automated? Just answer that. Again, most people, I think of HyperStation as a regression testing type tool. It's a traditional, in some respects, from a keystroke capture type capability, but it gives you the ability to execute those test cases that are built via batch. And so again, with the CLI plugin that allows us to submit JCL to our mainframe, then we can essentially run those HyperStation scripts from a Jenkins pipeline. And so that's how we do it. Again, with that ZOS plugin, you can essentially, anything that you can run in batch from a testing standpoint, you can submit via that Jenkins pipe or other pipes leveraging a RESTful API request. So it's certainly possible. It depends on the testing tool and its capabilities and how it can be initiated, how it can be executed. Again, with HyperStation, we're able to do that, and it works very, very well. I've done a lot of that. Next question comes from Jonathan. Jonathan asks, how are test cases and test scenarios typically stored and managed? That's a great question, Jonathan. That's right up that may be a potential winner right there. What I tell folks, it can be done a lot of different ways. These are simply files that can be leveraged essentially in any file management system that you want to leverage. What I encourage people to do is if you're doing automated testing, maybe on the non-mainframe side of the house, and a lot of our customers have been doing that or are beginning to do that, and they've already developed a strategy to maintain and to store those test packages, use cases, or scenarios, test scenarios in that existing file manager. I tell them to leverage the same system that you're using for your non-mainframe test cases. A lot of people, a lot of our customers are leveraging Git with regard to storing and managing those test cases, and that works wonderfully with our total test solution. So just a matter of getting those test cases generated, all the associated files, they're packaged up, and then they can be stored essentially anywhere that you want to store them. Git seems to be a predominant location for storage and management of those test cases. And again, that works well from an automation standpoint, works well from a manual standpoint within our own Topaz solution. So leverage what you're already using, I think is the right answer. But again, it can be anywhere. Git, I think, is a great answer. Let's see. Next question is from Amanda. Amanda asks, how can you automate test environment setup? That's a good question, Amanda. And a lot of times you'll have situations where you want to refresh your data. If you're leveraging technologies like ZDT and you've got your own dedicated development environment, you can stand up that test environment as part of your pipe, and it can be wiped clean, essentially destroyed after the run, so that you start with a fresh, clean, usable test environment for each run. And that may be important to you, may not, just depends on how you look at the test. But you have the ability, and there are tools from a DB2 standpoint. I'm excited about what we're doing, or our acquisition from BMC and the capabilities that they have with regard to data and their ability to stand up, provision, test data, test environment. I think that's going to be exciting. There are other companies that provide some of those capabilities. But again, from a mainframe standpoint, you think about the creation of let's talk about DB2 tables, or even traditional COBOL file structures, VSAM, QSAM. All of those can be built, created via batch job. So you can stand up your environment. Again, it depends on what constitutes that environment, where your data stores, where are they going to be stored, located, and you have the ability to initiate, if it's on a mainframe, to the mainframe JCL that will manage that creation for you of that environment, or stand up that environment for you. From a data provisioning standpoint, with our tools, the file aid, you have the ability to build extraction scripts within file aid, and those can be executed in a batch mode. So, what we like to do, and I think what I encourage people to do, is in a good test data management system, you want to be able to manage those extraction scripts and those provisioning scripts so that they can be reused over and over and over again, and actually potentially provide some referential integrity between your test data and your software releases. That's optimal, but that's when you really can start to see incredible throughput, velocity, if you have that ability to do that. But again, from a provisioning standpoint, you can do all that from a Jenkins pipe. As long as from a mainframe standpoint, you can do it in a batch mode, and there will be other opportunities, other services that can be executed via the mainframe through other API requests as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. What I tell folks is that start to look at how, that work is being done today manually. And with just a little bit of research, you'll see that there are ways to initiate or execute that same work from within an orchestration engine. And again, it can essentially be any engine that can initiate an API or RESTful API request. Okay, next question comes from, let's see, this comes from James. Same first name, James. Steen talked about automating unit testing with total test. Can you talk about how that is accomplished? Yeah, I only got time to go through all the details of it, but with total test, you can generate those test cases simply by going into Topaz. You've got to have Topaz. You've got to have Expediter for automatic test case generation. You go in and there's a right toggle switch that you use to say, I want to capture this debug run as a test case. And so you've got to have that initial data for your initial debugging work. But then once that's there and in place and you're debugging and you want to capture that run and build it as a test case, it's simply a right click switch to build that test case. So that's how you build those test cases. They're built automatically, and then they're stored wherever you want to store them, as we talked about earlier. And then those test cases can be executed from within Topaz manually. So if I'm a developer and I make changes and I want to reuse test cases that are available for the code that I'm working on, I can manually initiate those. But if your team's got a commit or dev pipe that they're using to do your builds and testing is a part of that build process, then we've got plugins that we've already created for you that can be leveraged within Jenkins to initiate or execute those same test cases in an automated fashion. And so that becomes incredibly valuable. If you've got teams assigned to specific products, multiple teams can start to leverage those test cases to ensure that any changes that you make to that program or to that baseline are not compromised through the execution of these test cases that will give you a true false go no go response. And so that's how that's done. And again, it's simple. It's a simple execution of a Jenkins plugin if you're using Total Test to execute those test cases. Next question comes from Chris. Chris asks, how can you automate performance testing? Can you automate strobe analysis automatically in a Jenkins job? We've already talked about that. Yeah, you can. We do it every day, every night as part of our build. And we use Hyperstation for a lot of that performance testing. We just recently, I think either this past release or maybe the October release, came out with a plugin for strobe. And so if you're used to using strobe, and typically most organizations are using it from a production monitoring standpoint, you can actually use strobe as part of your development software delivery system, and you can do performance or create performance measurements against a run, and that can be part of your Jenkins pipe. So again, we've created a plugin if you're using Jenkins to make it very easy to take that test and to create strobe measurements. Now, where that becomes very valuable is if you've got performance critical applications that are part of your stack that you want to ensure that you adhere to very strict performance requirements, then you can, as part of that development activity before it gets into production, you can measure the performance of that using strobe, let that be part of that build script. And again, if you're using Jenkins, you can use those plugins, and so it just becomes part of maybe traditional testing type or workflow for the execution of applications, products that or where performance is absolutely critical to that. So you just measure performance metric against a benchmark that or a requirement that you have to have with regarding to the performance of the application to determine if you're in compliance or not. And if you're not, then you know you got a problem. You can flag that, send it back to the developer in an alert or notification to let them know that we've got a potential issue from a performance standpoint. And that's all available now as part of that software development process. And again, it can be automated within your software delivery pipes. I think that's a huge benefit. I'd like to see more and more people leverage that strobe in the development life cycle as well as from a production monitoring standpoint. So yes, you absolutely can do that. Next question is from Sue. Sue writes, can hyperstation test cases be automated? Yeah, we've talked about that. Hopefully everything we talked about, and yes, they can be automated. We automate them through the ZOS JCL plugin that I talked about. It's part of our Topaz CLI plugins. It works very, very well. And so the hyperstation scripts can be executed in batch mode. That's how we do it. Again, it works great. We use it significantly in the delivery of our products. And looks like the last question I've got right now is from Jesse. And Jesse said, Steam talked a lot about automating test case creation. How's that accomplished in a Compuware solution? Well, I did hit on that a little earlier, but I'll go through it real quick again, Jesse. We do it through Expediter. And so if you've got Topaz and you've got Expediter and you've got a license for Total Test, it becomes a right click within Expediter as you're debugging or you're starting to execute a debug session or run through a program through debug. Then you can say, I want to capture this run and create a test case for that particular run. Now, what happens from an Expediter standpoint is Total Test will capture the inputs coming into that debug session. It will look at logical flow within that program, and it will capture the outputs of that debug session, store all that information essentially in text-based files, and those make up your test case scenario, along with the framework or runner to run that. And so that's how it's done. It's done using Expediter. Now, there are lots of other, that's how it's automatically created using the inputs and the outputs of that debug session. You can go in and make modifications to those inputs and to those outputs manually to accommodate some change or to accommodate a specific test that you want to do. And it's very easy to do that. It's part of Topaz. It's GUI presentation, and we make it very easy for you to make those types of changes. But that's how those test cases are created. We're actually leveraging Expediter and Total Test in unison to capture inputs and outputs, store that information, and that's what's used at execution time. Now, the real beauty of that, I did mention this earlier, and this is important. Yes, you need that data as part of your debugging activity, and typically that's not an issue because that's how most developers are working anyway. But the good thing is that once those test cases are built and that data input and output is captured, you've got that in your test case scenario. You no longer need that that data in order to test that program because it's already there and available, and it will be passed to the program at the time you run that test case. And so that saves you a ton of time from a provisioning standpoint. You don't have to go through that effort that we typically go through over and over and over. So that's an important feature capability, is not only the reuse of the test case, but the reuse of that data and the minimization of work required to stand that data up for use within that test case the next time it's used. Let's see. Got a new question from Nimal. Can execute test case in mainframe COBOL older versions? As long, I'm not, and there may be some restriction on COBOL version, but I know that we've got clients who are running under 4 and certainly 5 and 6. I will check into that to make sure I'm right on that, but if not, we'll send you a note. But I think it can. I don't think that's going to be an issue. Now, there may be some restriction depending on where you're at, but I would say COBOL that you're using should not be a problem. But again, if I'm wrong, I will send you a note. Okay, and I think that's the end of our questions at this point in time. Again, thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate it. If you've got other questions that come up, you can obviously send them directly to me at rick.slade@compuware.com, and I'll be glad to respond. I've gotten several questions in doing these podcasts and doing these live Q&As via email after the fact, and so I don't mind doing those at all. I enjoy responding. Someone mentioned the other day that I enjoy being a problem solver, and I really do. That's one of the things that I get a lot of enjoyment out of. So if you do have questions, feel free to send them to my direct email address. Again, if you've got questions about these podcasts and the live Q&A sessions, you can go to compuware.com/goodcoding. All of the podcasts are there. So you can download any of those, and they're available to you. Again, if you've got questions, send them directly to me or get with your Compuware account manager, and we'll be glad to respond and help you out any way we can. I have a lot of conversations with clients directly about a lot of these topics and how to help them with their transformational journey, how to modernize or evolve is a term I like to use, their software delivery system. So I hope that you'll get with us and use me if appropriate. Next week, we're going to be spending some time with Bill Mackey. One of the things that I'm passionate about is the subject of continuous improvement. And one of the things that Compuware has done such a great job of, we've got some technology that allows us to capture metrics regarding work leveraging our tools, but other tools. And so it's called Z Advisor. If you're unfamiliar with it, then a lot of stuff on YouTube. Definitely want to get with your account managers about it, because what it does is essentially we provide you dashboards of information regarding metrics that are critical and key performance indicators, like KPIs, with regard to your software delivery ecosystem. And that information can be invaluable or very valuable when you're looking at your software delivery ecosystem to determine where you may have issues or where you've got constraints or where you've got gaps. A lot of times, most of the time, information that we can capture from our tooling and other tooling, Jira or Service One or different tools, just about anything, we can take that information and provide you with metrics and measurements that will be very helpful in helping you maintain an efficient, effective software delivery system. And so going to talk with Bill about that next week in that podcast. I hope you'll join us for that. Bill's a smart guy. He's the product owner for the Z Advisor product. So we'll spend a half hour talking about that, some good stuff. And I think he's actually going to join us for the live Q&A next week. So I hope you'll join us for that. It's great technology. And if you're a Compuware customer, it's free. And so it's good information for you with regard to managing your software development environment. It's good information for us because it helps us know where technology is being leveraged, where it's not. So it helps us from a resource management standpoint as well. So I hope you'll join us for that. I don't see any more questions. So again, thank you for joining us today. I hope you have a great weekend, great week, depending on when you're listening to this or watching this. Take care, be productive, stay safe, have a good week. Good coding, everybody. Take care.